Hello and welcome to Brain Power. I'm your host Thomas Trombley, and we'll be discussing topics ranging from current news, world events, and religion. Basically, whatever bit of news that catches my eye. If you have a story you'd like covered here, or a question you'd like answered, send me a message at Twitter at BrainPowerUp, use the hashtag BrainPowerUp, like the group at facebook.com/BrainPowerOnline, or visit the website at brainpoweronline.webs.com. Today is Sunday, May 17th, and actually doing things a little bit differently here, kind of breaking from my routine. I had originally thought that this podcast was going to be every other week, but I started to realize that there's just way too much news for me to do that. Too many things that there are too many things that come across my timeline on Facebook, too many things I see on Twitter, too many emails I get, just so many things that make me look at and realize, I can easily fit more shows in. That's why this episode exists. This is just at least a temporary thing. I'm going to try to see if every week works fine, but we're going to start things off with really a sad story that kind of touches me in my heart here. On May 14th, late at night, B.B. King died. Legendary blues musician B.B. King, he will be missed. Got the news story about that here. B.B. King, whose scorching guitar licks and heartfelt vocals made him the idol of generations of musicians and fans, while earning him the nickname King of the Blues, died late last night at home in Las Vegas. He was 89. His attorney tells the AP that King died peacefully in his sleep. Although he had continued to perform well into his 80s, the 15-time Grammy winner suffered from diabetes and had been in declining health during the past year. He collapsed during a concert in Chicago last October, later blaming dehydration and exhaustion. For most of a career spanning nearly 70 years and more than 50 albums, King was not only the undisputed king of the blues, but a mentor to scores of guitarists including Eric Clapton, Otis Rush, Jimi Hendrix, and Keith Richards. A preacher uncle taught him to play, and he honed his technique in abject poverty in the Mississippi Delta, the birthplace of the blues. I've always tried to defend the idea that the blues doesn't have to be sung by a person who comes from Mississippi as I did, he said in 1988. People all over the world have problems, and as long as people have problems, the blues can never die. Still, the Delta's influence was undeniable. King began picking cotton on tenant farms around Indianola, Mississippi, before he was a teenager and was still working off sharecropping debts after he got out of the Army during World War II. He goes back far enough to remember the sound of field hollers and the cornerstone blues figures like Charlie Patton and Robert Johnson, ZZ Top guitarist Billy Gibbons once told Rolling Stone. The man has been around for a long time. Without B.B. King, I really believe that the musical landscape of today would be totally different. He made a huge impact, and he will be missed. On to slightly different news, something just as sad, but for totally different reasons. Just recently, there was an Amtrak train that crashed in Philadelphia. Okay. Well, there's one guy who's claiming that homosexuality was a factor in the Amtrak crash. Anti-gay pundits such as Charles C. Johnson and the editors of WorldNet Daily are making hay over the news that the engineer of the fatal Amtrak crash in Philadelphia on Tuesday was a supporter of gay rights and may be gay himself. Today, on her radio program, American Family Association Governmental Affairs Director Sandy Rios also mentioned the engineer's sexual orientation, saying it was likely a factor in the crash. Now, I'm not saying I'm not inferring to those of you that are gay rights activists and like to monitor this show, I'm not inferring that this incident happened because he was gay, but I do think it's an interesting part of the story, and you can bet it would be edited out, Rios said. She then suggested that the engineer could have possibly been going through some confusion that has to do with the very core of who they are, and mentioned the story of an airline pilot who put his entire plane at risk because he had an emotional, angry outburst to something that happened, which, she says, was related to hormone therapy he was receiving. Rios added, I don't know, but I think it is something to be discussed, and I think it's a factor, and I doubt you will hear it anywhere else. Well, she's absolutely right. Aside from, me reporting on, or reading this report, you're probably not going to hear that anywhere else because it's stupid. I mean, at what point do you just cash in your brain? I mean, my personal favorite here is the story that she mentions about an airline pilot who had an emotional, angry. It was a male pilot that had an emotional, angry outburst to something that happened, which she relates to hormone therapy that the gentleman was receiving. So, generally, in this case, this would be referring to he's either taking estrogen or he's taking testosterone to reduce estrogen. The point is, she's basically saying that women can't be pilots because women who don't have as much testosterone as men would have emotional, angry outbursts to things that happen. Really, I mean, how stupid do you really have to be to say anything like that? Not only that, but granted, I don't know many openly gay people because they don't make up a very large percentage of the population. But the people that I do know, they are not confused about their persona one bit. They know exactly who they are. And personally, I am a supporter of gay rights. I'm not gay myself, but yeah, I believe wholeheartedly in gay rights. I'm not at all confused about who I am. And even if I was, I think I'd be able to set that confusion aside and do a job. I don't think that the person's potential sexual orientation may be a problem. I don't see that as an issue whatsoever, but whatever, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong. Speaking of stupid people, especially stupid people claiming to be intelligent, guess who is a doctor now? That's right. Mr. Kanye West now has an honorary doctorate from the Art Institute of Chicago. The Chicago Tribune actually pulled 5 quotes that they thought were pretty good from his 5-minute acceptance speech. Go ahead and read these quotes here, the ones that they called out and thought they were the best. I felt my nerves a bit, and I don't feel that feeling a lot. The nerves of humility and modesty when being honored. A humanization, a reality of being recognized. And all I thought as I sit here, kind of shaking a little bit, is I need to get rid of that feeling. I need to not be nervous. Well spoken, Dr. West. Well spoken. This honor is going to make your lives easier for 2 reasons. You don't have to defend me as much, and I'm going to make all of our lives easier. Yeah, he's really showcasing the fact that this doctorate is honorary, not earned. Apparently he opened with a joking apology for always speaking his mind. He said, "I'm sorry, that was just my opinion." Which is kind of sad, considering that's kind of similar to what I say on this show. But either way. And later he noted, "I'm sorry is something that you can use a lot. It gives you the opportunity to give your opinion, apologize for it, and give your opinion again. People say you shouldn't have to be sorry for your opinions." Okay. He's basically saying there that, as long as you say anything stupid, if you say anything stupid, as long as you say it's just your opinion, Doesn't matter what you said, because, oh, it's just your opinion. That's what makes it okay. And he went on to say, and it's these Floyd Mayweather belts that are needed to prove what I've been saying my entire life. Whether it's the cosign of Paul McCartney grabbing me and saying it's okay he doesn't bite white people, or the New York Times cover, or the Time Most Influential cover, and now a doctorate at the Art Institute of Chicago. Can anybody other than Kanye follow that train of thought? He totally lost me after the Floyd Mayweather belts that prove what he's been saying his entire life. What does Floyd Mayweather have to do with anything? It's whatever. I don't know. He went on to say, talking about George W. Bush, who Kanye once said George W. Bush doesn't care about black people. He says, George Bush has some very cool self-portraits. I didn't know he was an artist. And the real problem here is, you know, that in his next album or his next public appearance or really anything that he does where he can get his name out there, you know he's going to bill himself as Dr. West or Dr. Kanye or something like that. And personally, what I'm really looking forward to, though, is he'll end up on some talk show or something, and I'm waiting for him to confuse the difference between PhD and MD. You know, because some people they'll sign their, if they're a doctor, they'll sign their names, Stephen Miller, MD. But those are medical doctors. Otherwise people will sign it PhD. I just want to see him sign Kanye West, MD. I don't know. I think that would be kind of funny. On to something slightly different. I frequent my local bar. I'm a regular there, so I'm familiar with how it is in a bar, how life is, and how you get drinks and all that. Here's kind of an interesting story. Citing his religious beliefs, Montana man shoots bartender for using wrong tomato juice. Yet another example of someone thinking their religious beliefs trump someone else's rights, in this case, the right to live. A Hamilton, Montana man is behind bars after shooting his bartender early Sunday morning. 59-year-old Monty Hansen had ordered a red beer, which is beer with tomato juice. But when he learned he had been served clamato, a tomato and clam juice mixture, he was furious. After the bar closed, Hansen reportedly went to the home of Joe Lewis, the 29-year-old bartender. Hansen says it's against his religious beliefs, he is Jewish, to drink clamato, so he allegedly shot Lewis. Court records said he told a neighbor later that he was going to retaliate and kill Lewis, the Montana Standard reports. Hansen was arrested and arraigned on a felony charge of attempted deliberate homicide and a misdemeanor count of animal cruelty, the Missoulian reports. Lewis was hospitalized, but Hansen also shot Lewis's dog Jackson in the head. The purebred red-nosed pit bull died, literally taking a bullet that saved Lewis's life. See, now, that's kind of a heartwarming aspect of this story. That's a good dog. He's pretty broken up about his dog, Mike Lewis, Joe's brother said. Anyone who knows him knows he's not your average animal guy. He takes his animals very, very seriously. Joe earns his living chopping wood and working at Hamilton's Rainbow Bar. His brother, Mike, has set up a GoFundMe page to help with expenses, since Joe won't be able to work for a few months. Joe hasn't asked for any of this, Mike Lewis told the Standard. In fact, he's pretty reluctant about it all. He's the kind of guy who will give you the shirt off his back and never ask for anything in return. It's been hard on him to allow us to push him down and tell him he has to take it. And that's, once again, that's another example of Like it says right at the beginning, yet another example of someone thinking their religious beliefs trump someone else's rights. In this case, the right to live. I'm sorry, but I don't care what religion you are. Your religious beliefs do not trump anybody's rights for any reason, ever. And yes, I'm mainly talking to Christians here. The idea of, oh, well, in the Bible it says contraceptives are wrong, so, we're not going to allow you to sell contraception. Fuck you. No. Whatever. I'm gonna get off this topic before I actually start to get angry, which I know will happen soon. But hey, actually, you know what? On that note, speaking of contraception and contraceptives and the idea of Christians and the Catholic, whatever, all of them pushing it down, a California judge has actually overturned a law that says abstinence-only sex just doesn't fly. California has a sex ed law on the books that bans schools from pushing abstinence alone in teaching about pregnancy and STD prevention, and a Fresno County judge has now enforced that law. Superior Court Judge Donald Black's decision ruled that the Clovis Unified School District, located in an area deemed a hot spot for some of the highest teen pregnancy and STD rates in California, went against state law. Black also mandated that sex education has to be complete, medically accurate, and free of bias, and include info on all kinds of birth control, STD, HIV, AIDS prevention, gender roles, and sexual orientation, The Guardian reports. Teens deserve complete, accurate health information, says the ACLU, which calls the ruling a huge victory for students. The ruling comes after parents, with support from the American Academy of Pediatrics, the ACLU, and the Gay Straight Alliance, filed a lawsuit in 2012 claiming Clovis students weren't taught about various methods of birth control and were mainly informed about abstinence and hetero lifestyles, per The Guardian. One video the students watched told them to adopt the mantra, "one man, one woman, one life," while another video compared a woman who wasn't a virgin to a dirty, used pair of shoes. Who could give someone foot fungus, the suit alleged. The judge's ruling seems to be in line with what the nation believes. A January YouGov/Huffington Post survey showed that 66% of the 1,000 adults surveyed believed teens should be taught about various methods of birth control. I could not agree more. The idea of abstinence only, first out, really, what teen follows all the rules all the time? I'm sorry, but if you tell them that this is the way, this is the only way, they're going to find another way. If you teach them how to be safe, but while doing what they're going to do anyway, it's a lot better. And that's just my opinion, but anyway. Oh, I'm sorry, as Kanye would say, sorry, that's just my opinion, but, it's my opinion, so I'm going to tell you to you again anyway. Once again, some more sad and kind of stupid news. The news itself isn't stupid, the news itself is sad. The people involved are stupid, at least in my opinion. There is now one less giant panda in the world. China Central Television reports that police have arrested 10 people suspected in the killing and dismemberment of a protected wild panda, including 2 brothers said to have been the ones who actually killed the animal. Acting on a tip, police in the Yunnan province raided a home and found panda meat, bones, and fur. They say the brothers sold about 77 pounds of meat and all 4 of the animal's paws to one merchant for $800, who then sold the parts to other buyers, reports the AP. The brothers told police they were hunting for a wild animal that had killed one of their goats, NBC News reports. After spotting what they claimed they thought was merely a large animal in a tree, the brothers shot and injured the bear. Police say they then fatally shot the wounded female, despite knowing it was a panda. If convicted, the suspects, both the hunters and the merchants, could face years in prison. Only about 1,800 giant pandas exist in the wild, making the black market for them lucrative. And this goes along the same line. I've seen this a lot on Facebook. I don't know if anybody else has seen it, but there's a thing of people hunting white rhinos now again as well. I don't know if it's still the same poaching trade that's always been around, or if it's stopped for a while and now it's returned. But it's just stupid to me that in this day and age, in modern society, people will still go out of their way to hunt an animal to extinction just for some supposed benefit to humanity. Like, for example, the white rhino. Apparently, if you take the white rhino's horn and you grind it into a powder, it's really good for it's an aphrodisiac. So's vodka. I mean, if you need powdered rhino's horn to get a woman naked, I think you're doing things wrong. It's just that simple. But whatever. This is actually a two-part story. Because the story is written on two separate days. Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, once again, he's considered the smart brother in the Bush family, so that's what kind of scares me a little bit reading this story. Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush says that he would have authorized the 2003 invasion of Iraq, but acknowledges that mistakes were made after Saddam Hussein had been removed from power, in an exclusive interview with Fox News' Megyn Kelly. I would have authorized the invasion, and so would have Hillary Clinton, just to remind everybody, and so would almost everybody that was confronted with the intelligence they got, Bush told Kelly in a wide-ranging interview that will be aired on Monday night. This story was written on May 11th, so May 11th was a Monday, so I'm assuming they mean this Monday, Monday the 18th, tomorrow. Anyway, Bush says that the United States failed to focus on security first, which he argues led Iraqis to turn on the military because there was no protection for families. However, he challenged the idea that the security issue was a point of disagreement between him and his brother, President George W. Bush, who ordered the invasion. By the way, guess who thinks that those mistakes took place as well? George W. Bush, Jeb Bush said. Yes, I mean, just for the news flash to the world, if they're trying to find places where there's a big space between me and my brother, this might not be one of those. Speaking for Newslow, former President George W. Bush's brother also stated that, I really believe my father and brother did a heck of a job in Iraq, especially my brother since he's the one who ended the terror of a murdering dictator. If and when the time comes, and I hope it will come in 2016 with all my heart, it is my full intention to continue my family tradition of bringing forth democracy and righteousness onto the world. Bush added, Iraq was just the beginning, and I can't even take credit for that, but there are many more countries in need of democracy in the world these days. Haven't you heard? And that's the really sad part, because all I hear, I don't know about anybody else, but what I hear from this statement is, it's going to be a crusade. Yeah, we're going to move up and we're going to bring Christianity to the rest of the world. And obviously not just Christianity, but that's kind of the platform that the entire Bush family has run on since the beginning. But if Iraq was just the beginning, that tells me that Cuba is next. Why? Because they're right there, and they're a tiny little country, but they are not a democracy. Or maybe he's going to stick in the Middle East and going to say Iran is next. That's a very well-known theocracy. I'm just absolutely terrified that this Bush becomes elected. I hope that the American people are smart enough to look at it and realize the only smart Bush was the father. He was the only good one out of the group. Anyway, like I said, this was a two-part story. Here's the second part. This story was actually written on May 14th, so a couple days later. After a week of Iraq headaches for Jeb Bush, he gave what sounds like a final answer yesterday, May 13th. Here's the deal. If we're all supposed to answer hypothetical questions knowing what we know now, what would you have done? I would not have engaged. I would not have gone into Iraq. He told a town hall meeting in Arizona per NBC. By CNN's count, that was the 5th time this week he's offered a position on the war, having initially told Fox that he would have authorized it, before saying he had interpreted the question wrong, and describing it as a hypothetical. He stressed that he didn't want to say anything that could be seen as disrespectful to those who served and died in the conflict, and that their lives were not lost in vain. Bush said he hadn't spoken to his brother before clarifying his positions on Iraq, the Washington Post reports. I am loyal to him, he said. I don't think it's necessary to go through every place that I disagree with him. As for the current situation in Iraq, Jeb said that the U.S. needs to re-engage and do it in a more forceful way to combat the barbaric Islamic threat, the Post reports. Analysts say they're surprised at how badly Bush has fumbled a question long seen as the elephant in the room. The question about Iraq is not an illegitimate hypothetical question, GOP strategist Steve Schmidt tells CNN. If you're sitting around pondering a Jeb Bush candidacy, it's the first obvious question that you have to be able to answer. Once again, I agree wholeheartedly with my previous statement earlier. All I hear when I hear Jeb Bush talking about Iraq is Iran, Cuba, China. Well, China's kind of democratic now, but the point being, North Korea. I can see Jeb, going after these countries doggedly, like he himself has said. He believes that we need to go back into Iraq completely with full force, probably even reinstate the draft and just get everybody, all hands on deck, get everybody out there and do it right in a more forceful way to combat the barbaric Islamic threat? Really? First out, Islam itself is not a threat. Well, it's not a threat any more than Christianity is, which is quite threatening to some people. But the main problem is it's the radical Islam. It's the radical Islamists that are the issue, not your average farmer. But whatever. Speaking of religion, sticking on that topic here, something I find really funny. There's a so-called Marriage and Conscience Act, and it threatens to erase the church and state separation altogether. And that's actually related to something that's taking place taking place in the state of Kentucky. Here we go. If signed into law, HB 771, a bill authored and proposed by Louisiana's newest and most controversial state legislator, could provide tens of millions of dollars in taxpayer incentives to subsidize the construction of large-scale theme parks by tax-exempt churches and religious organizations. It's an outrageous proposal, and what's even more outrageous, the legislator behind the effort is suing the state of Kentucky for millions of dollars after it pulled the plug on New Earth creationist Ken Ham's ostentatious and delusional Noah's Ark theme park. Newly minted Louisiana State Representative Mike Johnson has deservedly earned an enormous amount of state and national attention after he introduced House Bill 707, the so-called Marriage and Conscience Act, which would allow private businesses the right to expressly discriminate against a broad set of customers based on their belief about same-sex marriage, and would prohibit the government from effectively enforcing any potential anti-discrimination claims. in the event that the Supreme Court decides to expand marriage equality nationally when it rules this summer. Despite the backlash when similar bills were filed in Indiana and Arkansas, Governor Bobby Jindal named Representative Johnson's proposal as one of his top 3 priorities during the current legislative session. Jindal also made this issue a centerpiece of his nascent pending campaign for president and the subject of a recent hugely controversial editorial he published in the New York Times. Notably, however, recent polling indicates that more than half of likely Louisiana voters oppose Johnson's bill, and more than 2 in 3 voters disapprove of Jindal, making him the least popular governor in modern Louisiana history and the least liked in the entire century. Wow. I mean, that's really kind of a big thing to be able to say that this is the least liked politician in Louisiana history. Now, I don't know much about Louisiana history. I'm straight north. I'm in Minnesota, actually, but I picture it doesn't matter what state you live in. For this person to be named the least liked politician in your state in the last century, holy crap. That's really, really saying something. Anyway, sticking with politics, Rafael Cruz, the father of Ted Cruz, he's talking about introducing a bill. He's got a plan to outfit police officers all over the country with body cameras, which is probably the first thing that I would agree with wholeheartedly with the Cruz family. And I'll just go ahead and read the story here, and I'll talk about it afterwards, as is my usual rant. A plan put forward by the district's mayor and police chief to outfit officers with body cameras, but not allow public release of the video, would undermine the program's goal of creating more transparency and accountability, say researchers studying the emerging technology. But Metropolitan Police Chief Kathy L. Lanier said Thursday that technology does not yet exist that would allow her department to adequately redact personal information from the videos. Noting that it would be extremely labor-intensive to redact such information, Chief Lanier suggested that city officials move forward with the plan to deploy cameras to 2,800 officers by year's end with a blanket exemption banning video release, and later draft regulations to outline public disclosure when the technology becomes available. It is critical to understand that restricting publication of sensitive body-worn camera footage does not mean that nobody will see it, Chief Lanier said during a D.C. Council hearing, stressing that her plan allows for oversight by various government entities. However, others suggested that deploying the cameras and then banning the video from being disclosed under the Freedom of Information Act could make residents skeptical of the government's claims of using them to promote transparency. A blanket FOIA exemption would undermine the purpose of the entire program, says Marcus Raukischer, a policy analyst with the University of Maryland Center for Health and Homeland Security. Law enforcement policy experts, victim advocates, and defense attorneys were among those who assembled at Thursday's hearing to provide input on the Metropolitan Police Department's plan to spend $5.1 million to purchase body cameras. The popularity of body cameras has grown nationwide as communities clamor to outfit police as a means to increase accountability of officers in the wake of high-profile deaths of black men at the hands of white police officers. You know, I'm actually going to break from my tradition here. I'm going to cut in for a second here. Yes, that's true. There have been high-profile murders of black men by white police officers. But unfortunately, and I mean this with all sincerity, there are black officers shooting white people. There are Mexican officers shooting Chinese people. There are black people shooting black people. There are white people shooting white people. The problem is everywhere. It's not just white cops killing black people. But that's whatever. Anyway, Texas Senator Ted Cruz's father, Rafael Cruz, stated that it was about time someone took charge of the matter before things got out of control. Speaking exclusively with Newslo, Rafael Cruz shared his thoughts on body cameras for police officers. Regardless of what anyone says, there is no such thing as too much control, and whoever says that has probably got something illegal on their mind. Well, obviously this guy's never read 1984. Whatever. He added, America blames white police officers for shooting black men without even wondering why such things happen. Well, they happen because of masturbation on the line of duty, and that's a fact. Think about that for a second. Masturbation in the line of duty. I can't see that really being that big of an issue. Are cops really just pulling around behind a 7-Eleven and just furiously rubbing one out? Really? Whatever. Mr. Cruz goes on to say, with body cameras, police officers will no longer be able to masturbate during their shifts, and that will make them less aggressive and violent, consequently leading to less deaths on the street. Even though masturbation on the job is less wrong than, say, gay marriage, it still causes police officers to be mellow on the job and, due to being surprised, respond to threats more aggressively than usual. Body cameras are a way to eliminate all that. Yeah. Really? I mean, the problem there is, to be a Republican, do you really have to trade in your brain? Is that kind of the way it goes? Like, Sappers, I'm not even going to get into these stories just because I simply don't have time. Right now I'm looking at about seven minutes left or so. I'm just going to read the headlines here. What do we got? Sarah Palin supports a black pastor who calls for reintroducing slavery on a voluntary basis. Ted Nugent calls for Native Americans to go back where they came from. Texas Republican to force women to carry deceased fetuses. Seducing men has its consequences. This Texas Republican says. And Sarah Palin once again, we abolished slavery and got Obama. What's next if we change the immigration law? A Latin president? I find it so very difficult to believe that she was on the ticket that almost got the presidency and vice presidency. Think about it. If she had gotten and become vice president and McCain died in office, holy crap. Not only would we have the first female president, but we would have the first female president with air inside her head. My goodness. Anyway, on kind of a similarly stupid thing, coming straight from the pulpit, Pastor John Hagee quotes, nasty welfare recipients don't deserve to live. Well, I mean, that's not a direct quote, but that's kind of a pretty good paraphrase. San Antonio, Texas, Pastor John Hagee of the Cornerstone Church delivered an impassioned speech decrying the evils of welfare dependency. While prefacing his remarks with an acknowledgement of the need of the disabled, infirm, and elderly to receive social support, he made it clear that he has little tolerance for able-bodied individuals who are living off the taxes of the working people. Pastor Hagee cited that statistic that the welfare population of the United States exceeds the population of Spain. He believes that many of these people do not actually need welfare and should instead reap the rewards of their actions according to biblical counsel. Referring to 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 10, for even when we were with you, This we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. He insists that such people are as are found gaming the system must get off the proverbial couch and work. His comments are certainly well intended, even if they came across as somewhat derogatory. The problem is that the sectors of the economy which produce mid to high wage income have not yet recovered from the 2008 banking crisis. The main sectors of the economy which have thrived are those producing low-wage jobs, which is what makes it very difficult for even working people to make a living. Coupled with the disincentive that a person can fare better on welfare than they can while working, and the picture becomes clearer. Yes, people need to work, but the economy isn't the rising tide lifting all the ships that it needs to be either. I see where he's coming from there, and I kind of agree with the statement that he's saying. Anybody who refuses to work and would just rather be on welfare, you're dragging the country down. You're dragging everybody else down. But there are people who can't find work, or there are people where work just isn't enough for them to get by, and they need the welfare. They need the support, and I fully understand that. Anyway, I'm going to finish things off. Last story of the day here. The Satanic Temple just filed a lawsuit against abortion restrictions. Earlier, on May 8th, an attorney for the Satanic Temple submitted a legal filing in Missouri opposed to anti-abortion legislation that, according to the Satanic Temple, constitutes a restriction of their free exercise of religion. Mary, a resident of Missouri and member of the Satanic Temple, entered Planned Parenthood at approximately 9:30 a.m. seeking to terminate an unwanted pregnancy. Mary presented the clinic with a waiver of exemption provided by the Satanic Temple in an effort to bypass certain items of compulsory protocol deemed by her and the Satanic Temple to place an undue burden upon her religious beliefs. The exemption waiver was rejected, immediately prompting the Satanic Temple to file a petition for injunction against the Missouri's Governor Jay Nixon and Attorney General Chris Koster. Specifically at issue are state-mandated informed consent materials, medically irrelevant anti-abortion propaganda, and a mandatory 72-hour abortion waiting period. TST's legal argument, the Satanic Temple is TST, their legal argument leverages the state's Religious Freedom Restoration Act, commonly popular among Christian conservatives who endorse it as essential to preserving the spiritual innocence of pious bakers who might otherwise be forced to bake cakes for godless homosexuals, and the move is certain to provoke a firestorm of controversy and witticisms. In fact, anticipation of TST's filing has already provoked a number of op-eds and early debates. This past Wednesday, Rolling Stone published a piece examining the hysterical ravings of 5 conservative authors who have already shown their hypocrisy in denying TST's free exercise claim while harboring records of clear support for religious freedom only when it benefits their own beliefs. While nobody can say for certain how this will play out in the courts, most analysts seem to agree that TST makes a strong case. Of course, some aren't entirely optimistic. On Monday, the Washington Post published a piece entitled, "A Satanic Temple Member Says an Abortion Waiting Period is Against Her Religion. Would a Court Agree?" in which the journalist took the opinion of one Thomas Berg, a professor of law at the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota, right here in Minnesota, was quoted as saying, "I think it's possible in theory for someone to raise a religious conscience argument for having an abortion, but it's unlikely to matter much legally." According to Berg, an expert on Religious Freedom Restoration Act style laws, the Satanic Temple's proposal essentially relies on the same question one would ask to determine whether the 72-hour waiting period violates the earlier decisions of the Supreme Court. Does the law impose a substantial burden on the individual seeking an abortion? And this is where I have to agree, kind of. It's the 72-hour waiting period, I think, should be in there. Because, once again, no, it doesn't put an unnecessary burden on the mother, but it really gives them time to think about it. That's not what's at issue, though. What is at issue is the religious materials that's being shoved down this woman's throat, basically saying, well, God doesn't want you to have an abortion. You're going to kill a soul. Oh, my goodness. Life begins at conception. Life begins at ejaculation. No, that is medically irrelevant. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end it here because it looks like time is up. This has been Brain Power. As always, I'm your host, Thomas Trombley. If you have a story you'd like covered here or a question you'd like answered, send me a message on Twitter at BrainPowerUp. Use the hashtag BrainPowerUp. Like the group at facebook.com/BrainPowerOnline or visit the website at brainpoweronline.webs.com.